everybody. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty, and joining me this week is Russell Glasser.
Hi, everyone.
And that was his idea, and we'll have all kinds of fun. We are live. It is Sunday, April 27, 2008. I'd like to welcome everybody to the show. We'll have the number up for you shortly. This is a public access, live call-in television program, and we'll get the number up, and you can call in and talk about the subject that we're talking about today or anything else that happens to strike your fancy. We are sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, beginning at around 11 o'clock. And except for the first Sunday of the month when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center, located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. Those lectures begin at around 12:30-ish. Showing up around 12:15 is good. The May lecture will not be happening. Instead, the ACA will be holding its annual elections for the board of directors. But the June lecture is already scheduled and in place, and it'll be State Representative Donna Howard, who's going to come in and talk about legislative issues that came up during the last legislature with regard to religion and things like that. Also, on the special events calendar, May 1st is the National Day of Prayer, which means it's also the National Day of Reason, and the ACA will be down in front of the Capitol, as always, demonstrating on behalf of church-state separation, the application of reason and evidence, and basically just having a good time. It's not a protest of the National Day of Prayer. People are entitled to pray. They're entitled to pray in public, and as long as there's not a government endorsement of it, we don't have a problem with it. So we're going to be speaking a little bit about church-state separation and mostly just having a good afternoon at the Capitol like most other years. In addition to this program, by the way, the audio portion of this program is available for download from our website. You can go to www.atheist-community.org or atheist-experience.com. You can download the audio and watch the video on Google Video. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. That's PROPHETS, and that features Dennis Lubay, Russell Glasser, myself, Schilling, and we were live yesterday. Had a good show, had a lot of fun, and we'll be on again in 2 weeks. It's every other Saturday from 2 to 3:30 Central. We don't take live phone calls during that, but we do run a chat service in conjunction with the program, so you can listen live if you want to and speak to a lot of the other live listeners. If not, you can download the podcast for that as well. In addition to the various media outreach services that the ACA provides, we also have a number of social events throughout the week, including the brunch at Romeo's. Also have Atheist Happy Hour at the Dog and Duck Pub every Thursday at 7 o'clock. And after this show is over, we all get together and go to El Arroyo on 5th Street. The address is up on your screen. We're on the air till 4:30, and we'll be down there around 5 o'clock, lasting till about 7-ish. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come to any of our events. You don't have to be a member to attend. They're open to the public, and things like the lecture are actually provided as a public service, and people are encouraged to come down and listen. The lectures don't just cover religious topics. We had a climate change specialist in a recent lecture. We'll probably be talking about black body radiation in the near future, hopefully. And I may actually be giving another lecture that covers Venn diagrams and truth tables and how they relate to both existential knowledge and belief, but I'll hold off on getting into more detail on that. We appreciate everybody who emails us as well. If you'd like to contact the show with feedback, criticism, questions, concerns, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, most of the co-hosts, and some of the people behind the scenes. Because of the abundance of spam that's been flooding our inboxes, please in the subject line put NPR or AETV or some other tag like that. That'll let you get through the spam filters and actually contact us. We cannot promise to respond to every single email we get. Now that the show's international and we have audiences around the world, there's just too much email to possibly answer all of it, but we do read all of them. We do take all the criticisms to heart, try to make some changes when we can. And we'd like to thank some of the people who emailed in to offer advice and expert instructions on how to correct some of the audio problems. Hopefully the audio is sounding good again. And also if you have anything along those lines, please feel free to send it both to this program and for the nonprofits if you're listening to that as well. Also on our website, there's a frequently asked questions page. If you have a question that we've already answered today, we'll probably just shuffle you off and recommend that you read the frequently asked questions page. But we'll answer pretty much any question at least once on the show, no matter how simple or stupid somebody may think it would be. We're open to all of that, and we'd like to have a discussion. The whole purpose of the show is to correct some of the misperceptions that people have about atheists, some of the things that are delivered from the pulpit or from the news media, to discuss issues, church-state separation issues, to find out what you believe and why you believe it, and whether or not we agree with you. We may or may not. It depends on how you define things and what your justification is. So on that note, I think I've covered all the major announcements. And there's a reason we had that intro song this morning.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I apologize for unleashing that dumb song on you. I actually considered going with Queensryche's I Don't Believe in Love, which is one of my favorites, but couldn't find an appropriate entry point to that song. So anyway, the topic today is, what is love?
Baby, don't hurt me.
No mo. And this is kind of a reaction to two different flavors of question that we often get on this show, and a lot of it comes down to the sort of single most common thing that people say when they call up, which is, "Y'all are atheists? Does that mean you believe in nothing?" As I'm sure we've tried to make clear every single time that happens, the word atheism doesn't mean nihilism, and yet it's very pervasive. People wondering this. I Googled, I did some random Googling this morning and just ran across something on answers.yahoo.com, where somebody was asking, "Christians, don't you feel sorry for atheists that only believe in things they could see?" Atheism only means you don't believe in a God. It doesn't mean you don't believe in anything else. We believe in lots of things. We believe in, we believe in a real world. We believe in physical objects. We believe that people are real. We believe that people have brains, and we believe that those brains display patterns which we describe as emotions.
And by we, Russell's probably mostly talking about Russell and myself.
Yes.
Because one of the things about atheism, and I just want to hit this real quick,
yeah.
Atheism is a response position to theism. Basically, it just says that you're not a theist. You don't accept the theistic proposition. It says nothing at all about whatever else you do believe or don't believe. So you can be an atheist and be liberal or conservative, Republican, Democrat, pro-abortion, anti-abortion, pro-death penalty, anti-death. You can have a position on any different thing. You can be an atheist and a nihilist. You can be a solipsist. It doesn't say anything at all about what you do believe.
Right.
So,
atheism doesn't entail any beliefs besides atheism. So saying you're an atheist, doesn't that mean you believe in nothing, is pretty much an equivalent question to saying, so you're a person, doesn't that mean people that you believe in nothing?
Yeah.
Because some people believe in nothing. So, hey. One of the things that they say they feel sorry for us about is that we don't believe in anything, and specifically many of them think that we can't possibly believe in love. But as I said, we believe in brains, and we believe that brains exhibit emotions. So let me get to the topic of the show today. What is love, anyway? I'll go with Merriam-Webster first to give me a basic definition. They said that love is 1, strong affection for another arising out of kinship or personal ties. 2, attraction based on sexual desire, affection, and tenderness felt by lovers. And 3, affection based on admiration, benevolence, or common interests, as in love for his old schoolmates. Now, I actually hit on these points a few months ago when I was talking about evolution in a long series. I got to a couple of shows where I talked about evolutionary psychology and game theory.
Right.
And so basically these different kinds of love can all be sort of explained, so to speak, in the context of evolution. And I'll touch on each one of those now. We'll consider 3 kinds of love. There's romantic or sexual love, which is falling in love with a person of the opposite gender, or in some percentage of the population of the same gender. And there's family love, loving your parents or children or siblings or extended family. And then there's friendship, where you're often said to love a friend like a brother, for example.
I love Russell like a brother.
Aww. I love you too, man.
Thanks. It's the Love Fest show. We need love rings at the end, so.
Yeah, I guess so, but we would have to have set those up. So I think it's a little late for that. So anyway, we can talk about all those in terms of evolutionary biology, and if you really want some detail, you can go back through our archives on www.atheist-experience.com. But to briefly recap, romantic love can be explained basically by the desire to procreate. And I know when you put it that way, it doesn't sound particularly romantic, but we are in a way programmed by our genes to be interested in doing whatever we can to have sexual relations with somebody who appears to be a good surrogate parent. And that often translates to monogamy, where your feelings also extend into having very tender feelings towards the person who is your most frequent sex partner, and wanting that person to be protected and not come to any harm.
And also, in addition to the kind of strictly evolutionary justification for romantic love, I think there's another thing in addition to, and this is where romantic love kind of overlaps with familial love, which I know you're going to get to, but it's not strictly limited to who you want to have sex with or who you are having sex with.
Right.
There's an idea we're not only social creatures, but we seek companionship and fellowship.
Absolutely.
And so there's an element of romantic love that comes down to who do you want to share your life with? Who do you want to, kind of focus your attentions on? The who completes you thing. Some of it may seem, I don't know, overly sappy.
Right.
But it goes beyond, simple procreation, even in the romantic sense.
Sure. And I suppose another thing would be that if you've had children with somebody, then they have the same interest in keeping those children safe as you do. So I'll get to the next kind, which is family love, which is essentially an expression of your genes protecting themselves. If you have if you have a child, then that child is essentially the copy of you that will survive into the next generation.
Right.
And also, if you have a brother and your brother has children, the brother has half your genes and his children have a quarter of your genes. And so that's a kind of family love that makes sense. And I'll repeat the JBS Haldane joke, which I never get tired of, which is that he said, "I would never die for my brother, but I would die for 2 brothers or 8 cousins." And then, of course, there's friendship, and I did a whole show on game theory and coming to the conclusion genetically that tit for tat is the best strategy for dealing with people. That basically it's I'll scratch your back and you scratch mine arrangement, where you make friends with people because essentially you make a sort of informal agreement to do nice things for them, and they do nice things for you. And you're more inclined to do nice things for people who have been good friends in the past. I'm not saying that this is a conscious calculation that goes on, but it's something that's been factored into sort of instinct and stuff. So that's the sort of clinical view of love. And I know that in general it's not very romantic to talk about love in that way. But just because you can recognize love in a sort of scientific perspective doesn't mean that it doesn't feel unique and exciting to the particular person whose brain is generating those feelings of love.
Exactly. And I didn't know if you were going to go into detail on this at all. Neither one of us are cognitive neuroscientists or anything, but people are like, well, what is love from the perspective of the brain? And we know that, we can map the brain, we can determine what's going on in the brain at any time when people are not only thinking things, but feeling things. So we have a decent understanding, though not hardly a perfect understanding, of what happens in the brain when somebody's in love. And one of the things that tends to trouble people is when you say that love, in a realistic sense, is a collection of electrochemical responses in the brain that trigger certain feelings and perceptions. And it's been likened to chocolate. The euphoric experience that people can get when they have chocolate and appreciate that. And that seems to diminish the value or the understanding, appreciation of love for some people. But in my view, it doesn't change it at all. It doesn't change the feeling that one experiences. It's just as real. It's just as impactful. It's just as a driving force in our lives. Knowing how it works may take some of the magic out of it, but only if you have this appreciation for keeping the mystery. I have no problem at all not only having some understanding of how it works, but wanting to have a perfect understanding of how it works and still appreciating it for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking for myself, I think that understanding something doesn't cheapen an experience. I think that if anything, it makes it so that you can appreciate it on a deeper level. If you have an appreciation for music and you're just a casual person who likes music, then that's a great thing. But if you study music and you learn about chords and progressions and fugues and dynamics, then when you listen to a piece, you can get a whole new level of appreciation out of it. As an avid computer game player, I've had a lot of chats and read a lot of work on the design techniques of computer games, and it makes me really understand what it is that I enjoy and home in on games that I like more than others and why.
Yeah.
And I think that this is very similar with understanding what it is that makes you feel in love.
Not only that, and I may get in some slight trouble for saying this, so if there are experts, please be ready to call in. But it seems to me, and I don't want to remove all the mystery and destroy, melt love down to being nothing more than some kind of predictive chemical experience. But it seems to me that the better that you understand what's going on, this could have practical applications as well. Instead of going in to just see a counselor when you're having problems in your marriage, for example, if we know what goes on in people's brains when they truly are in love, then you may be able to actually analyze and find out, is this the love that you think it is? Not just to say, oh, well, you guys are fooling yourselves, you're not in love, because we go through various stages and you're not necessarily always in love with somebody.
Clearly the fact that books like Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, which may not be a good example because, that's full of some sappy stuff, and that guy has himself been divorced 3 times. So maybe this isn't the best
example. He should know.
Yeah, I guess he should, yes. But the fact that kind of book, those kinds of books are bestsellers, it indicates that people not only yearn for love, but they also seem to have an impulse to try to understand love from whoever is pitching that they have an explanation.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I was going to say about love in general, but the reason that I thought it would be an interesting topic for this show in particular is because because the concept of love in this vague, broad way comes up in sort of 2 forms very frequently, and I'll give you the 2 right away. One of them is as a proof for God, as in, God is love. We've heard that very often.
Congratulations, I'm a theist.
Yes.
If that's all God is love, I happen to believe that in love, both in its existence and its efficacy.
Right.
So I'm a theist.
without a God, they say, we would have no concept of what love is, and so if you do feel love, then you must be recognizing the face of God.
See, and if that's the case, this idea of without God we would have no concept of what love is, then clearly God is also hate.
True.
Otherwise we'd have no concept of what hate is. I mean, we're going to use the argument.
And the other context that it comes up in is when people say, well, I thought you didn't believe in things you can't prove, you atheists, but you can't prove that love exists, so ha-ha, you're a hypocrite. So I'll take these one at a time. First, I'm going to go into more detail with the God is love argument. And my first question in general to that statement is, what does that even mean? I mean, come on, love isn't at least according to many theists, God is some tangible thing. I mean, the universe wasn't created by emotions. I mean, you could argue that the universe was created as a result of emotions happening in the mind of God, but then God isn't love, God has love. It seems love isn't a tangible thing. I mean, without a mind to experience love, there's no such thing as love. I mean, rocks don't love, and there's no like big ball of love that you can buy at the store. Well, maybe if you go to Forbidden Fruit here in Austin or something. I haven't checked for those, but so in the first place, that doesn't even make any sense to me. It's kind of like saying God is speech. Talking is something that happens when your vocal cords vibrate the air around and form patterns which have been developed over centuries as the English language. It's an entirely human-centered concept. Speech is something that's been developed by human minds. And there's not a thing called speech. Speech is just patterns that get generated by those vibrations which your brain creates. And I think saying God is love makes as little sense as saying God is speech. So what I want to ask those people who say that God is love is God just an emotion that happens in your mind? Because if it is, I can live with that. Like Matt said, I'm a theist then, because I believe emotions are real. I said right at the top of the show, and I believe minds are real, and I even believe that love is real, and I'll tell you why when I get to the next topic. But if you're but I don't think what you guys really want to say is that God is just an emotion and nothing more. I mean, most of you believe that God created the universe and actually does stuff.
Yeah, it seems like a kind of an exaggeration, oversimplification thing, right, which is just so prevalent in religious language. The way that religious people describe things, it's largely exaggerated and often oversimplified. It's like, oh, God is love, and God is peace and joy and understanding. And
well, I would be happy with that just as a metaphor. Yeah. Like God is love. Love is chocolate. That makes sense to me. But I was interested when people started calling in, and this happened more than once, and they started to argue that God was love as proof of God, as if it weren't just some poetic notion that they had, but they actually were literally meaning God is love, and we're trying to argue for this in some way.
It'd be the rough equivalent of saying God is peanut butter exists, therefore God exists.
Right.
Congratulations, you win. Why didn't I think of that? Exactly how did peanut butter create the universe?
And it seems to me that trying to equate God with love is just another example, which is pretty common, of Christianity or some other religion trying to co-opt a concept which we already think of as good and then sticking their God in there. So that you'll have happy feelings about their God and then feel bad for trying to argue against it. I mean, they're taking credit for things that we already like. God is love, God is the source of our laws. Look, it says, right, thou shalt not kill. even though every culture has had an issue with killing, regardless of whether they were religious or not.
In fairness, though, I think a lot of, having been a Christian in the past and having talked to a lot of them, I think what a lot of them mean when they say God is love is that God is the source of love.
Right.
And so the way they use this as a proof is love exists, and we assert without evidence that God is the source of love, and
right.
therefore, since love exists, God must exist. The problem is that your assertion that God is the source of love is completely unproven, and you can't use love to justify that because that's circular.
Right.
So my question, the question that we get a lot of is, well, where does love come from? Well, it comes from your brain. I mean,
before there were brains, there wasn't any love.
Yeah, if there's something else, if you have this belief that there's something behind it, whether it's God feeding love into our brain, or a transcendent soul that is in our body somehow that uses our brain to experience love, that's something you actually need to demonstrate, because you're violating Occam's razor. You're adding another claim that's unjustified, and by the way, unnecessary. As far as we can tell, there's no reason, there's no justification for going beyond the boundaries of the brain when trying to come up with an explanation for where love comes from or what it is.
Right. Somebody wrote to us this week at the TV mailing list where he was making a bunch of unjustified claims, where he said that, I hope you atheists know that all the brain surgeons believe that there's no place for emotions to fit in the brain. Memories.
And
right.
The vast majority of brain surgeons have come to their final conclusion that the brain is insufficient to store memory.
Right. He didn't quote the particular study that he was referring to, but he assured us it was true, and I'm sure he thought we had no reason to doubt him.
He or she. I have no idea.
Yeah, he or she. There's no... There doesn't seem to be any lack of evidence that that thoughts and feelings all come from the brain. I mean, people also say it comes from the heart, and you can see how they would make that mistake, because when you fall in love, for instance, your heart beats faster. So they used to think that emotions were in the heart, but now it's pretty well established that brains are the thinking center of the body.
I kid you not, and I will try not to use any names. My roommate had a professor teaching philosophy.
At?
Don't want to say.
Okay.
Who swears that she legitimately feels emotions in her heart. That they're not in the brain at all.
Right.
That her heart has some sort of feeling function that we know is in the brain. We can demonstrate it's in the brain by actually mapping brain activity and mapping heart activity, and yet she swears, and not metaphorically, that these are experienced with her heart.
Well,
her actual physical beating heart.
Yes and no. I mean, when you stub your toe, you feel it in your toe, even though the sensation is actually originating from the brain. I mean, I guess in that sense.
Yeah.
I know that's not the way she meant it, which means that she's a remarkably unqualified philosophy professor. That's a snap judgment on my part. That's all I've heard about her.
Fair enough.
Okay. Let's see. So I was saying that Christians have this tendency to co-opt things that we all already regard as good, like not just love, but our laws. They say, thou shalt not kill. Nobody would know that if it wasn't in the Bible. Or they say that marriage is a covenant between a man and a woman, and it is a holy ritual that's sanctified by God. Well, not really. I mean, people were getting married way before the church was actually involved in it. They might have called it something other than marriage, but the concept that we have as marriage, which is two people getting, intending to continue being monogamous for the rest of their lives, that didn't start with the church. Actually, it's interesting. one of the things I learned from somebody else who's been on this show in the past is that marriage was actually deliberately co-opted by the church in a political act called the Tametsi Decree, Tametsi. In the Middle Ages, there was this edict that said that from now on, no marriages shall be recognized as legitimate unless they are sanctioned by the church. And to be sanctioned by the church, obviously you had to jump through a lot of hoops and pay a lot of respect to the church and probably, a little extra. And, this was a great arrangement for the church, and it seems to have fixed in everybody's minds that marriage is a religious institution and nothing else. Bull. Marriage is just as much a legal institution as a religious institution, and it always has been. But I'm digressing. I mean, the point is, this is a typical example of religion just ripping off stuff that everybody thinks is good already. Okay, so on to the next topic that I brought up, which was you atheists, you say you don't believe in things you can't prove, but you can't prove that love exists, so if you believe in love, then there's just as good a reason to believe in God. Well, first of all, if you say that atheists say that we don't believe in things we can't prove, you're just not listening.
Yeah.
The word proof doesn't really apply to things in the real world. We say that we can prove things like, Socrates had his famous syllogism that all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, and therefore Socrates is mortal. And that's a legitimate proof that Socrates is mortal, except for the fact that it relies on the assumption that the first two claims are true.
Yeah, in a strict sense, it's not a proof at all.
Right.
It's a syllogism, it's an argument. Proofs generally apply to math.
Right. Now, you may be speaking to an audience who already accepts the fact that all men are mortal and that Socrates is a man. And then in that case, it's a trivial matter to prove to them, who already believe your premises, that Socrates is immortal.
Of course,
Amortal, not immortal. Okay.
If you're a particular type of Christian who believes that Jesus was both man and God, then the premise "all men are mortal"
is false,
and the syllogism crumbles.
Right. Good example. Scientists and people who see things in a naturalistic way don't see things in terms of proof exactly. Proof is for pure logic and mathematics. But you don't prove things in science, you just confirm them over and over again until you have a high degree of confidence in them.
Right.
And in that sense, I think love is pretty well demonstrated as an emotion. Given that love is an emotion in the brain, all you have to do to persuade people that love exists is point out a shared human experience that influences human behavior in ways that can't be dismissed as chance. For instance, if you're asking whether I would save the life of a person at great risk to myself, it really depends on who that is. If it's my son, then almost certainly. If it's Matt, then probably, although, I'm not going to guarantee as much as, I'm not going to guarantee as much for Matt as for my son.
I'll live with that.
Okay. If it's a stranger that I've never seen before, then, that's going to be a tricky decision.
And that's the other thing, is that there may not be an actual decision. Given the situation, you have no idea how you're going to react. Yeah.
The instinct, which is caused by this feeling of love, which is generated by, our evolutionary building of our genes.
And it's something that can also be manipulated. Right. This idea of love, whether it's, let's take for example the family kinship, is something that can be manipulated to change behavior. And that's something, and I can speak from experience, that the military does. After doing more than 8 years in the military and going through boot camp, The entire thing, one of the major points of boot camp is to break down barriers and reestablish a familial bond within these groups of people who should be, for the most part, total strangers. Because once you do that, now you have a camaraderie, you have this band of brothers where people are more willing to sacrifice their life for their brother standing next to them. So,
Right.
I mean,
So that's interesting. It's reconditioning. I mean, I don't want to draw too big a parallel between the military and, well, cults do that also.
Right.
And I don't mean to say that the military is a cult at all, but this is a very powerful tool that can be used for good or bad.
I think it would qualify under most definitions. I mean,
You think?
except for the intentional isolation, where they prevent you from seeing your family and friends. That part I don't think is in there. But as far as
Well,
like
not
conditioning
intentional, but they do it anyway.
yeah, well,
I mean, for a long period of time.
I was in the Gulf War and did a couple of 6-month cruises. Yeah, it's a way, but it's not. That's just part of the job. It's not
Right.
part of. So I don't want to say the military is a cult.
No,
but
I don't
the
think so.
tactics are similar, and they're not necessarily. And I don't necessarily mean that in a negative way. May be the case that the only way to build an effective military to protect the rights of everybody is to do something like that, to convince people, and it's not necessarily just a manipulation, but to convince people that we should share some connection with those other people in the society
Right.
around us. Just because they're strangers doesn't mean they're less valuable. And that may actually be a good thing. I'm not saying
And
that.
I'm in favor of establishing intellectual connections with people, not sort of connections based on tricking you into thinking they're your family.
Right.
But then again, the tricking you into thinking they're your family is a reasonable shortcut to establishing these connections a lot quicker. I had a Christian say to me one time that we should love all people, and I said, well, why should I love Osama bin Laden? And he said, because he's human. And I said, well, that's not good enough. I don't love all people. I don't even think you particularly should love Osama bin Laden. I think if he were captured, I think he should be punished very badly. And he said, well, maybe the most loving thing you could do would be to punish Osama bin Laden. And I said, well, if that's what you think love is, then I don't recognize what you mean by love.
Right.
Because if I saw Osama bin Laden and I had an opportunity to drop him off a cliff, I would do it.
Yeah.
And if that's loving, then I don't recognize that as anything related to what I feel for my family.
Yeah, if you say you should love Osama bin Laden, then when you see him, you should run up and give him a hug and a kiss and tell him how much you love him.
And stab him in the back. No. Let's see. Well, so can you prove that love exists? No, but you can't prove that anything exists. But what you can do is establish evidence that something exists. And obviously there are some things that are shared in human experience that we would recognize as, shall we say, symptoms of love. Things happen when you're in love. You behave differently, like for instance, you're willing to put your life on the line, like we just said. And you're willing to put your life on the line in ways that are not consistent with just survival or benefit to yourself.
Right.
People like to mischaracterize evolution as just survival of the selfish.
Yes.
Whoever can act like the biggest jerk to people and grab all they can for themselves is more likely to pass on their genes.
And they also
That's not true.
mischaracterize survival of the fittest by making these crazy assumptions about what qualifies as fitness. Oh well, if this cold, heartless, evolutionary worldview means that you just kill all the people who aren't strong enough or aren't smart enough.
That's stupid. Why would you even kill everyone you meet? I mean, what would it get you?
But the thing is that evolution is something that's being acted on by natural selection, and natural selection determines what's fit. You don't determine what's fit.
Right.
Evolution doesn't lead to eugenics. All it does is natural selection acts on random changes to determine what's going to survive. Now, we can manipulate that in some sense. We have unnatural selection. We have conscious selection, but by, well, maybe we don't. I was going to say by what mates we choose, but you may actually be a victim of your own biochemistry as to who you're attracted to and who you're wanting to pass your genes along.
Yeah, right. I've got more to go with, but actually it looks to me like Jay has a really interesting question, and I'd like to take it.
Okay. How you doing, Jay?
Pretty good.
Hi.
I'm going to go back with Matt. Matt disagrees with me constantly.
Oh, not
Yes,
constantly.
he does.
No, I don't.
Because what I'm going to go back to is the form in a metaphysical form of what love really is. Now, you go back, it's an instinct within you as a human being, something that you inwardly feel. It's not, that had to be a sexual feeling.
Right.
But if you take it, let's go to animals. A mother dog loves her puppies. Even a cougar, after a certain time, she will turn on it to kill it, but as long as she has trained it, all that training period of her life, she loves those offsprings. Now,
When you get to things with lower brain functions, it becomes more abstract to talk about them as loving things. But yeah, if you're just going to a cougar, I can see applying love to that.
and this is what I'm saying. Because a human being is still strictly some form of an animal, to me. So when you sit there was a book written by William Peck, The Road Less Traveled. Either one of y'all read it?
I don't think so.
Is it
It's
poetry?
excellent about love. It's a real, truly good book. Grab it, read it, and it tells you
Okay.
that one of the biggest feelings of love, to express it, is when you learn to let someone go that you really have an emotional bonding with. That's a hurt love, of what he describes it. And he goes through the different feelings of it all the way down the line. And it's something which I went back to go and really went through it because it took me a long time to really discover. Being as a gay person, I could love a female and deeply did. Physically,
Sure.
To this day, I still have a strong feeling towards one certain person. And I never could figure out who I was. It was hard walking down that road, trying to really express what made something that was complete, both mental and physical. And that's a real strong bond that I don't understand to this day, and drove, as you say, therapist, priest, and all of them crazy up the wall trying to figure out the whole story. Why could I fall in love with someone of the opposite sex to the degree that it is emotional but not physical?
Right.
And this is why I say love is a very complicated word that we as human beings put. I say it goes into something more into a metaphysical form of love than any other feeling that you've got. Man, wake up, because metaphysical gives you the right to go into a inward part of your brain to feel something that I don't think we normally would do.
What do you mean by metaphysical exactly?
Something that goes out to give us a different sense of being.
I'm fine with that. Do you think that it has to necessarily have a supernatural component? In other words,
In a
something...
sense, yes.
Okay, then that's where we disagree.
Because I don't mean that, Nat always says you can bend a spoon. I'm not talking about that voodoo crappy junk. It's a feeling that we have that we relate to another person. That someone else does not feel that same way.
Right.
And if there are times, yes, there's been some times I have felt things towards another person, you feel something in a sense it's not good. It's bad. And I don't mean evil as in being a thief or something like that, that there's something that can happen. And it has happened.
The thing that I don't understand, Jay, is I agree with you on everything that you're saying about the nature of the experience. Love is a label that we put on a broad spectrum of experiences, and the sexual love is different from the romantic love, is different from the family love, is different from the friendship love, and all of these things. What I don't understand is why you think that there has to be something that goes beyond the physical. The actual experiences can be accounted for, even if we couldn't. even if we had no idea how the brain works or how the electrochemical responses are, you know, the serotonin levels rising and how it affects our body, even if we had no idea that any of that was going on, what justification is there to assume that these feelings transcend the physical, that there's some kind of supernatural metaphysical sense?
It goes into the feeling that you yourself feel.
Right, but
Don't ask me what it is, because I'm not. Like I have told people, there's things that I can sense. I can walk up to somebody and I sense something, good, bad, or indifferent. Not all the time. It's not 1,000%.
Well, I've walked up to people and had thought that I could read them like a book, and sometimes I'm right, and sometimes I'm wrong.
Okay.
But what that is, there's no reason to think that that's supernatural or metaphysical. We are, first of all, human beings are really, really similar. We're similar biologically and physically, which means that our mental processes and our attitudes are also similar. We're social creatures, and you've spent your entire life dealing with people and being able to spot, let's say, the person who's lying because they get that particular expression on their face, or they look this way instead of that way. All of these cues that we don't necessarily consciously realize we're observing, we are constantly observing. And our brains are incredible at putting these pieces together. We'll still make mistakes.
Right.
So what reason do you have for thinking that there's something beyond the brain doing it?
Your extra sense that you feel sometimes, that you can feel it, that if you sit down that way, there's just a being. I have sat there before and just actually sat down there. I'm not going to go into full detail because it would reveal too many things what I've thought about certain people.
Okay.
I think a theme...
And what I know, and by sitting in there and I looked at them across the room and just, in a sense, I said, oh, I can't stand them, despise them. Not showing any other emotion, but me just really simply sitting there and concentrating and thinking about them. God, what am I doing here? You know, with them in the same room.
Yeah, I understand.
Anyway, later, honestly, during that close time, someone says, "Well, I know," he walks up to you, "that you can't stand me, and I'm sorry that I've upset you today or something for just being here." There's a connection between your thought and then eventually with what they say. When there's no connection at all between you, you see what I'm saying? Verbally.
See, and that's the thing. Every time that science has tried to demonstrate that any such connection like this exists, it's failed. The most reasonable explanation is that without realizing it, you're sending signals with body language that they're able to pick up on, just as you were able to pick up on their signals when you decided you didn't like them. I see no justification. I mean, I understand the feelings that you're having, and even your desire to kind of put that kind of extrasensory label on it. I just don't see any justification for it, and every time it's been tested, it's failed.
I think a theme that we try to hit a lot on this show is that, we do believe in people, and we believe that people are smart and that their emotions their thoughts and feelings are legitimately their thoughts and feelings. But in order to connect people's thoughts and feelings with something that is real in the real world outside of themselves, there needs to be sort of a higher standard. How many romantic comedies are based on the premise that a couple of people hate each other at first sight?
Yeah.
Right? They see each other, they despise each other, they fight all the time. Sam and Diane on Cheers, who, I hate you. Are you as turned on as I am right now? More!
Yeah, but if you go
and they
back,
fall into each other's arms.
eventually, then you become and you learn who they are and know them.
Right, but that just goes to show that...
That's not what I'm trying to express to you.
But that just goes to show that sometimes your initial instincts about somebody, as real as they feel at the time, are wrong. They're not magical. They're a very interesting and intricate part of the human experience, but they're not, they don't have some superpowers that tap into some mystical realm of arcane knowledge that you don't know how you get. There's a reason that you get these feelings.
Like, for example, I've had people email me about a particular phone call where somebody says something, and they're like, you were really disrespectful to that caller because as soon as they opened their mouth, you rolled your eyes. I had no idea that I'd even rolled my eyes, and that's a huge signal. I'm not going to apologize for it because that's my reaction. If they said something that I roll my eyes at that I find silly, sorry, that's what my reaction is. But the point is, I had no idea I did it, and that's a big signal. And we're capable and proficient at reading signals that are much more subtle than that. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate it, and we're going to move on to some other calls, Jay. I don't see the reason to put a kind of an extrasensory perception type label on it. But if that's the label that works for you, that's fine, because I think we're mostly talking about the same thing.
There's another book I told you, if you would read it.
Yeah.
Common Sense Christianity. That whoever answers your phone, I told him for you to go read it. I don't want you to read. Then I'm going to wait for you, what is it, June 1st, you come to Peace Park or down at Waterloo?
To the Pride Festival?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be there.
I'll be down there, and by that time I can talk to you all day long and be there with you to talk, to see, and read both of the books, and then I want your opinion.
Okay, I'll try.
Or even both, because I'm too old to come to y'all's meetings. God, when you get to my age, you don't like getting that crowds and
That's fine. I can't promise that I'll read them, but I'll try. I've got a bunch of books and I've got a new job.
Don't do them.
I'll do my best, Jay, and I'll look forward to seeing you down at the Pride Festival in June.
We appreciate hearing from you,
Thanks
Jay.
for calling.
Bye-bye.
Now, personally, I have to say I never promise anyone to read books for them, because while I will sometimes read books that people recommend, I read slowly when it's for recreation. And I don't like having people demand that I read more, but I might check that out.
Yeah, I've got a handful of books that I'm trying to get through, and part of the problem is that between the TV show and the podcast and the new job and everything else, finding time to actually sit down and read has been kind of problematic. But I will do my best to get through at least one, if not both of those books.
Okay, well, good call. Let me go on a little bit with what I'm saying before we get to the next
there's
caller.
one call on the line right now. If you just hang on for a minute, the number's up if anybody else needs to call in, but I want to kind of get through the end.
Well, I do want to get through this today, but that doesn't mean we can't take another call right now. What do you think?
You want to go ahead and take one?
Yeah, but let's not promise to take the next caller right
All right. So, Nick, you there?
Hello.
How you doing, Nick?
Hi.
I'm doing good. I just turned on your show a while ago, and the guy was talking about, one of your previous callers was talking about loving Osama bin Laden.
Well, it wasn't a caller. I was just bringing up an old example.
Okay. Well, I tuned in late. Anyway, my response to that is like, generally speaking, most people love the people that love them. You don't love people that hate you, so that's a natural human thing.
Right.
Generally, that's the case.
Yeah, to respond to, so to say that you should love bin Laden is totally absurd. I mean, but in any case, what I really called to discuss was, have you guys ever had a discussion about the role of Christianity, the Christian love, turn the other cheek, love your enemy, in relation to how that, well, like for example, the Roman Empire adopted that as the official state religion because they knew it would help them control.
With one of the emperors, yeah.
Yeah, help them control the people.
We've talked about some of this stuff at different times. I mean, the show's been on for 11 years, and actually, it's a good time to remind people that if you go to atheist-experience.com, which is the website for the show, if you click on the left-hand menu, there's one that's Show Archive. If you scroll down, you can actually click another link that will expand the Show Archive to show you all of the shows for the years, and there's like 4 years worth that are up on Google Video.
Okay. Well, the topic today is just love.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. Yep. I don't know
the
as
other
far as...
theory that I forget who said it, but anyway, exaggerated vanity is the definition of love.
That's kind of interesting.
Sounds kind of cool, yeah.
Yeah.
That was Oscar Wilde, I believe it was.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I'm a confirmed atheist. I'm 66,
Who did your confirmation?
Well, I mean, I've confirmed myself.
Amen.
And I've been an atheist for probably since I was about 15. I was born and bred Catholic, you know, and went to Catholic school. But even before I got out of Catholic school, I was rejecting their you know, that primitive type of thinking.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I just want to go and put my little 2 cents in right now.
All right,
Sure.
thanks.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks, Nick.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, we've. Go ahead.
Well, as far as turn the other cheek goes, I think that in many cases it's a good principle. I mean, like,
Yeah.
you know, if two people are holding a grudge against each other, then, you know, eventually one person turning the other cheek can actually end a bad, you know, a conflict between people, and that's
It's
great.
a for tat reciprocity issue.
Right.
Whereas at some point, if you both turn on each other, you're going to keep turning on each other until somebody decides to not only stop, but probably stop twice in order to get the cycle shifted.
And I've had relationships with people, rarely, but occasionally, where I didn't like them for a long time, and then that changed due to some bigness on their part. On the other hand, you don't want to say that this is always the best thing to
Right.
do, because, I mean, going back to the case of Osama bin Laden, we could say that Osama bin Laden comes up to me and I don't drop him off a cliff. And that may be considered very loving of me, except that if Osama bin Laden then goes on to kill another 1,000 people, then I might kind of rethink that decision and think, you know, by loving Osama bin Laden in that way, by turning the other cheek, I'm at least partially responsible for the deaths of those people.
And you don't even have to go to such extremes. There may be cases where turning the other cheek, being forgiving, being loving, is the best strategy, and there may be cases where it's not, because if you're constantly turning the other cheek, you make yourself a victim. You open yourself up to being used and mistreated by unscrupulous individuals who really don't care that you're turning the other cheek.
Going back to game theory again, and I can't give too much background right now, so this may seem confusing to people who didn't already hear that show. But if you're in a situation where you can either cooperate or defect, like we've said, it turns out tit for tat is the best strategy. One of the worst strategies is always cooperate.
Yes.
No matter what the other guy does, you just cooperate. No matter how many times you get stabbed in the back, you keep being nice to that person. That's a good way to, you know, always lose.
Yeah, and we've talked about before also, and I'll
In
let
fact,
you get back to that. Go ahead.
even people who are otherwise inclined to cooperate with you suddenly switch around and start defecting just because they know they can take advantage of
Right.
you.
You've shown that you're open to being used, so we're going to make use of you. And we've talked. One of the other things we talked about, Nick was talking about, you know, basic Christian ideas like turn the other cheek, and perhaps sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not so good. This may be a good time to put up a link for ironchariots.org as well, because one of the things that I did on that site was an entire deconstruction of the Sermon on the Mount. So if you go to ironchariots.org, which is the counter-apologetics wiki that Russell and I started, and it's had contributions from lots of people, from listeners to this show and the nonprofits as well. If you do a search for Sermon on the Mount, you'll find a verse-by-verse accounting that goes through and says what instructions, because people, Christians in particular, tend to view the Sermon on the Mount as the greatest thing anybody's ever said. I mean, it's not just sliced bread, it's sliced buttered, you know, fried bread with cheese. It's a grilled cheese sandwich with Jesus' face and stamp of approval on it. And I went through and looked at it and said, you know, let's take a look at this seriously, because I fully accept that there are many things, many words and sayings that are attributed to Jesus that are good advice, and there are some things that aren't. So there's a verse-by-verse walkthrough of the Sermon on the Mount that shows which bits are good advice, which bits are sometimes good advice and sometimes not good advice, and which bits are really bad advice. And to me, if you're honest, it's hard to find harder evidence to show that Jesus wasn't some omniscient God-man if he's giving bad advice. Why would God give horrible, horrible advice. Like, take no thought for tomorrow. Don't bother, saving anything or worry, but God's going to provide everything you need. That path leads to hobos. And and now I have to apologize to hobos a second time. Maybe I need to come up with some other word than hobos, because there's some really proud hobos, hopping on trains and riding around. But anyway, we're way off track.
There is actually an article under Turn the Other Cheek, but it's very short and just gives the quote. So I really ought to go back after this show and add something to that. But anyway, yeah, we're getting off track.
That's okay.
Okay, to backtrack a little, we were talking about whether you can prove love, and if not, how can you justify believing in love? And I was saying that proof isn't a valid concept anyway, but you can demonstrate love. People who are in love behave differently. They're more likely to disregard their own survival in order to protect somebody. And their body chemistry changes. I mean, like we were saying before, you feel love in your heart because your heart beats faster. Your blood pressure goes up. Your sweat glands start working overtime. Your breath gets faster, depending on what kind of love it is, obviously.
Yeah, because you're not doing much for my sweat glands or anything right now.
Right. And those things can be tested and measured. So when they say you can't measure love, well, sure you can. I mean, you can't be 100% reliable on it, but you can sure measure it, and you can find something with greater reliability than random chance.
Not only that, but this whole thing is, as I mentioned before, love is a label that we put on a wide variety of behaviors and experiences and observations, but it's also a very personal thing. I can look and see a mother and a child and see the smile on her face, and I'll just say, that's love. I have no need of any further evidence. What I'm doing is observing a behavior and applying the label to it as I see fit.
And
I don't need to
you're
measure it.
basing it also on past experience with people who behave in a consistent way with regard to the person they love.
Because I know how my mom looked at me.
Yeah, sure.
And still does. Hi, Mom. Love you.
There's no way
she's
that
not
she watched
watching
this show.
That's right. Still love you.
So, I mean, if I was going to design an experiment to detect love, for instance, I would never claim a perfect accuracy rate. But, what I would do, for example, is I would take pictures of somebody's loved ones. I would pick a bunch of subjects, take pictures of their loved ones, and mix them in with a bunch of pictures of strangers that they never met before, and just show them to them and measure their brain activity. I mean, I would imagine that something changes and can be detected in a reliable way.
And to make it a good experiment, make sure that among the people that aren't among their loved ones are people that they recognize and people that they don't recognize.
Right.
So that you can make distinctions about whether or not they're just recognizing a familiar face or if they have some kind of strong emotional connection to that face.
Right.
See, we've done it. In a minute and a half, we've come up with a scientific experiment that can demonstrate the phenomenon we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Now, why can't you psychics do that? Why can't you homeopaths do that? Why can't you astrologers do that? Why can't you religious people do that?
Yeah, we don't mean to say that you have to have perfect accuracy. I mean, we think that I think that those ESP tests that they do are pretty good, like in the beginning of Ghostbusters.
With those other cards, yeah.
Yeah, where they show cards and you try to guess, and you see if you can consistently guess in a way that can't be attributed to random chance. It's just that people don't manage to perform under those conditions, and then they give lame excuses like, oh, there's skeptics in the room, they're destroying my energy.
Okay, so as an experiment, I just drew a picture on this piece of paper, and if you think you're psychic and can tell me what this picture is, feel free to call.
Okay, very good. So now I've established a case for believing that love exists, but I can already hear the theist saying, well, you could use the same arguments for God existing. Couldn't you use the same test for God? I mean, God is a shared human experience. People report the same kind of feelings about, thinking about God. So if you can demonstrate that love is real in that way, why can't you demonstrate, why can't I use the same argument to prove that God exists? And my reaction to that is, you can, if by God you mean the feelings you feel in your brain that are associated with God. I mean, there's no need to make that distinction with love, because if I say love, or I say the feelings in your brain that are associated with love, both of those are valid dictionary I could get them out of the dictionary as that's what love is. The feelings that you feel related to love are exactly no more or less than what love is. Are you going to make that claim for God? Because I don't think you want to do that. I don't deny that belief in God exists, and I never would. I just deny that the belief is connected to anything that is in the real world. And if you think that this is different from love, actually it isn't. You don't need something that's physically real in order to experience love. I mean, embarrassing confession here. Around the time I was 15, The Little Mermaid came out by Disney, and Ariel was so hot. I had a major crush on her as a teenager. She's a cartoon character. I mean, she's a hot redhead in a seashell bra, but she's an invention. And yet, I felt those feelings.
You are absolutely crazy, because Jessica Rabbit was so much hotter.
Well, Jessica Rabbit too, but there wasn't that innocence about her,
Ariel, she was a fish.
She got legs though.
You pervert.
And love is also very subjective. I mean, we were talking before about how you can. Different people may have different conceptions of what love is.
Right.
And as another example of this, consider the battered wife of an alcoholic husband. She would say, people would say, why would you stay with that guy? And she says, well, he loves me, and I love him. And people would still say, you think you're in love, but get over it. You've got to get out of that situation to save your life. When people say that love is transcendent and supersedes all physical world considerations, I say no. Some people, love makes some people idiots, and in certain specific cases, they'd be better off disregarding their supposed love. So, to conclude, if theists want to say God exists and he's just a feeling that I have, then I totally agree with them. And I bet you could test for belief in God the same way that you could test for love. But proving the existence of a belief is a far cry from proving the existence of an all-powerful being who created the universe. And that's all.
That's it?
Yeah, now we're in trouble.
Oh, man.
Call!
So the telephone number we can put back up as a reminder. After the program's over, we'll be going to El Arroyo. The address is up on your screen. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come down. But if you come down to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. You can just call into the show and tell us what you believe and why, what your thoughts are. What do you think about love? Did we get some aspect of it wrong? Is there some insight that you have that we don't? And while we're waiting, I want to touch on an email that we got this morning that I don't have access to. I don't have it right in front of me.
Hey, I came up with the Star Trek rule a few weeks ago. I could kill time with that.
Yes, and that might be good to touch on too. This email, I was hoping that the guy would call in today. It's Adam, I think was his name, who kind of raised a couple of points about religion. One of the things that he was saying was that religion is kind of like medicine, that it makes people feel better, and that the only problem is that if you take too much of it, you can poison yourself. Boy, that's a really nice sentiment.
If you take sugar pills, you can make yourself feel better too.
And now you've killed the punchline.
Oh, shoot. I hate doing that.
So, next. No, it's a good sentiment, but it's wrong. Religion's like a placebo. It can make you feel better, but it's not actually treating any real problem. It's not actually doing anything real. And it may actually cause more harm because the real problem goes untreated. And if it's sugar pills, you can take so many of them that you can make yourself sick as well. This idea that religion doesn't do any harm, that it just helps people, that it's a good thing. The question that he asked was, do you think the world would be better off if everybody was an atheist? And the answer is yes. But only if they're atheists for the right reasons, and only if they have a good understanding about reality. Somebody who got mad at God, or just said, I don't want to live with any kind of, religious practices, traditions, codes. That's not the kind of atheism I'm talking about. And it's not so much atheism that is at issue here. What we're talking about is the application of reason, rational thought, critical thinking, and evidence to the decision-making process. What this person's saying by saying that religion is kind of like a medicine that makes people feel better, you're saying that it's okay and even preferable to lie to people if it makes them feel good. That may be the case in some situations. I'm sure there are cases where we lie to kids and we do it thinking that it's in their best interest, and it may in fact be in their best interest in some cases. I'm of the opinion that the world would be better off if people actually understood reality and learned to deal with reality on reality's terms.
Right. On the other hand, just because they lost their belief in God doesn't mean they'd suddenly start thinking.
Right,
so,
yeah. The absence of belief in God doesn't mean that you have any sort of grasp on reality or that you can make good decisions. Yes, I think the world would be better off if people abandoned religious beliefs. Why? Nobody's ever been able to provide a real benefit of religion that can't also be achieved by secular means, any real tangible benefit. The examples that this person used were things like, people dealing with illnesses or drug addiction or alcohol addiction. Well, congratulations. There are secular solutions to that as well. Secular sobriety being one of them, but also people can deal with their addictions on real terms. And what I'm saying is that while we don't have all the evidence to demonstrate that this is actually true, this is what I believe. If I can learn to understand reality and deal with it on its own terms, that to me seems like the best course of action. Because now I'm dealing with the problem. I'm not hiding from the problem. I'm not coming up with a placebo. I'm not coming up with a lie or some kind of comforting story to take my mind off of reality. If I'm sick, I go to a doctor. If I have an addiction problem, I seek help. And I don't need to seek it. I don't need to do what the Alcoholics Anonymous groups do, which is to say, oh, I'm this weak and feeble human, I can't possibly resolve this situation on my own. I must therefore turn to a higher power to deliver me from this addiction. What a crock. What a crock and an insult to all of those people who actually have beaten their addictions. Because for the ones who didn't go any kind of religious route, they obviously did it on their own. And for those who did, they did it on their own too, but they lied to themselves while doing it. That's the way it really works. Take credit for what you've done. Take responsibility for your actions. If you harm somebody else, it's your responsibility to make amends for that. Seeking forgiveness from a God is not a solution. It's asinine. Seek forgiveness from the person that you've harmed. Take responsibility for your actions. Take credit for your accomplishments. Pride is not this evil thing. False pride, that's a problem. Being proud of your accomplishments is nothing to be ashamed of.
It actually reminds me of a cartoon that I saw in Mad Magazine years ago, where I think it was, I was a terrible alcoholic, but I finally got over it. And the other person says, yeah, how did you do that? He says, well, now I smoke a lot of pot. Or I shoot a lot of heroin, maybe would be a better punchline. Okay, so we have empty lines, 15 minutes left. Feel free to call in. And in the meantime, I'm going to resort to reading old blog posts of mine. We have a persistent commenter on our blog, that's atheistexperience.blogspot.com, who keeps reading Bible verses to us. I mean, in a typical post, at least a third to a half of the actual text of the post will be quotes from the Bible.
And in addition to that, a good chunk of what's left is quotes from some other apologist.
Right.
I'm not
quotes
convinced
from
this guy's
another
ever had an original thought of his own, but...
And, we try to tell him, and this is a very common method of argumentation when it comes to atheists versus theists, and it's very annoying, and I always tell people, could you please stop doing that and just write what you think, because we don't care about your Bible quotes. And I often get a reaction like, hey, well, I will not stop reading Bible verses to you because you need to hear it, even if you're afraid of what the Bible has to say to you. And I can't help thinking that these people just don't get it.
Yeah, I'm not afraid. I'm not only not afraid of the Bible, I got one handy.
Yeah.
It's the best tool for
And you read it.
atheism ever. I read it all the time. Well, not all the time, not while I'm talking to you,
But at the same time, most of the time when I see Bible quotes in a post, I just skip them.
Yeah.
I mean, because, it's like, I've read this stuff, it's not that insightful, and I'm going to just, skim that part and see whether this guy has a point.
Hey, you want to gamble?
What?
You want to gamble? Oh.
Oh, well, did you win?
No, but let's go and take this.
Wait, no.
Oh, okay.
No,
do your
I'm in the middle of something now.
Okay, do it.
But yeah, hang on there, Johnny. I said, think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to have a conversation with some guy who really loves Star Trek. Every time you try to discuss something with him, he suddenly perks up and babbles random Star Trek references. He'll say, in episode 45/4211.4, Captain Kirk said, "The only solution is a balance of power. We arm our side with exactly that much more. A balance of power. The trickiest, most difficult, dirtiest game of them all, but the only one that preserves both sides." Sometimes the Sometimes the Star Trek quotes make sense in context, and sometimes he just says things that seem to be a complete non sequitur. But he always quotes them with great significance, as if the words of Captain Kirk are the greatest pearls of wisdom that have ever been offered to the world. After a while, wouldn't you stop paying attention to what this guy says? I mean, not that there's anything particularly wrong with Star Trek, but it is, after all, a fictional story written by some guys in Hollywood trying to make a paycheck. That's what we think of your Bible. Now wait, you're about to argue with me and tell me why the Bible is the greatest book ever written. Shut up and listen. I'm sure there's an argument about why the Bible is important to you and why we should pay attention to it, but the important thing to realize is that we haven't accepted the Bible as true yet. Maybe you can change our minds, but you're never, ever, ever going to change our minds by quoting from the Bible. It's like trying to prove that Star Trek is true by quoting from Star Trek. It doesn't work, it's annoying, you're wasting both your time and ours. I mean it. In fact, let's henceforth refer to this as the Star Trek rule. And I'll try to remind you of it in future conversations to make sure it sinks in. The Star Trek rule is, before you quote the Bible to atheists, always ask yourself whether the same statement would be just as effective in your mind if you were quoting Captain Kirk instead. If the answer is yes, then you may be making a good point that people will listen to. If the answer is no, then you are probably trying to rely on the Bible as something that people will see as credible in its own right. And atheists, because we're blind to the merits of the Bible, will miss the point. Okay, let's get to Johnny.
So we're going to start using the Star Trek rule on callers too, but Johnny, you there?
Yeah.
How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Thank you very much. I just had a quick question. Do either one of you have children?
Yes, I have one in the studio
He's here
today,
today.
actually, but he had to go out because he was being noisy.
Okay. And I was just wondering, how do you handle the topic of Santa Claus? Do you tell your kids that there's a Santa Claus, or do you not?
This was a big disagreement between me and my wife for a while, and oddly, I was the one who thought it was kind of harmless and fun to teach him about Santa Claus, but she thought that it was not appropriate to lie to your kids, even in fun, and we went that way, and so Ben has never believed in Santa Claus and has come dangerously close to disillusioning his classmates even at 5 years old. So we try to talk to him about respecting other parents' desires to have fun with their kids. And he asked why is it okay for those parents to lie to their kids? And I said, well, it's like playing a game. It's not exactly lying, but they think it'll make them happier. And he said, well, I'm happy. So, this is an ongoing discussion.
Okay, that was pretty much it.
Yeah, I don't have any kids of my own, and I'm not sure exactly what my take is on the question at all. I've heard good arguments that from some people who I think may know what they're talking about, that this is not only harmless, but it may actually potentially be a good thing, because it can end up being used as a way to teach critical thinking in a long term.
Critical thinking is that if you tell them that there is a Santa Claus, if you don't.
No, I mean, at the point in which they discover that the Santa Claus story is not factual, that can be used as an opportunity to demonstrate critical thinking. I'm not a big fan of lying to kids at all, but I do recognize that not all lies are created equal, whether they're to kids or anybody else. I mean, if your wife says, do I look fat in these jeans, you better lie. and if you're trying to plan a surprise party for somebody, you have to lie. I mean, or you have to be creative with the truth. So there may be some situations where it's not particularly bad.
See, the thing is, we don't think that it's necessarily an absolute value not to lie to people. I mean, if you're a family that's hiding Anne Frank from the Nazis, and the Nazis come knocking on your door and say, do you know where Anne Frank is? I think the principle, you should not bear false witness, doesn't apply there.
Yeah, but there's a difference between lying to someone to protect them or to eventually tell them the truth about a reward that they're getting, and to lie to some kid to get them to go to bed early, which is a form of control.
Yes, that's my big objection, is that if this Santa Claus thing, instead of being a fun thing that maybe supports creative thought and eventually gets used as critical thinking, if instead it's being used as a tool to manipulate, be good or Santa's not going to bring you anything, then I think it's just as vile as religion where it threatens hell. And in that case, I wouldn't go along with it.
Calvin and Hobbes, which was the best comic strip of all time when it was being run, used to have these long philosophical discussions where Calvin and Hobbes were riding down a hill in a wagon, and while they head down toward their inevitable crash landing, they have these semi-deep philosophical discussions about things like Santa Claus. And it's really obvious that they're really talking about God. But, it's hilarious when they talk about it in terms of Santa Claus.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Cool. Nothing else?
No, I was just curious about that. That's it.
All right. Thanks, John.
Thanks for
Appreciate the
calling.
call.
Thank you.
Well, so you've done the Star Trek thing.
Yeah. Let's see. There was more to this question, or there was more to this post, so I might as well just wrap us up real quick.
We had a caller that called but dropped.
Did they get a topic up on the board?
I don't know. What was the question? Can you put the question up in the message box? Maybe we can still answer it.
Yeah, we can answer it even though they're gone.
I think it was something about what does being an atheist mean to you, or something along those lines.
Yeah. So anyway, to get back to the Star Trek rule, so the bottom line about the Star Trek rule is learn how to make your own damn arguments. I mean, just figure it out. C.S. Lewis could do it. Lee Strobel can do it. You can too.
They're not particularly good at it.
No, but at least they write their own material.
Yeah.
They break it up with the occasional Bible quote. But
if you're going to run around plagiarizing people, at least try to find somebody good to plagiarize.
Right.
And fortunately, in the apologist community, they're few and far between.
Yeah, and C.S. Lewis and Lee Strobel didn't have some magical superpower. It's just putting your own thoughts in order and explaining them. And if you have to quote from the Bible, and frankly, I haven't seen many situations where it's worth bothering, but if you think you have to, then at least afterwards explain in your own words why you think, for us idiots who think that the Bible is no more credible than Star Trek, that we should care about the chapter and verse you just quoted. And also, that verse that everybody uses all the time against atheists, the fool has said in his heart there is no God. Ha ha, zing! We've never heard that one before. Your fictional book about God says we're fools not to believe in the fictional God. See, this is a doubly bad way to preach effectively, because first, it breaks the Star Trek rule, like saying, Captain Kirk says you're a fool. And second, it makes you sound like a dick. If your goal is to make all the Christians secretly reading the thread chortle at your great insult, then go ahead and be a dick. Doesn't matter to us. But if your goal is to actually persuade these foolish atheists that we should accept Jesus, then just don't be a jerk, because they won't listen to you.
Interestingly,
Yes.
hey, you want to let's do an experiment.
Okay.
This may fail. This may backfire. I don't take any stock in what's in this book at all. I'm going to set it here.
Okay.
Open any random page. I want to be fair, because I have this theory that I can find something objectionable or offensive in their holy book.
How many
on this new
sentences
page.
do you need?
I just open any page and I'll find something on the page.
On the page?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sweet.
Here you go. We have
Oh,
Joshua
there's a lot
12
of
through
Gaths
13.
and Kings
Yeah,
and
the
stuff
boring,
in there.
that's all the boring stuff.
So there's a caller calling, and we waited. And I'm going to see if I can actually find something. But you're going to have to talk when I do
Do
that.
you want to answer the call?
Well,
Well,
it
you
on?
won't be able to listen to
let's
it.
risk it.
All right.
We have no idea who you are, but you're on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
So-
Hello, this is Joe. This morning on CBS,
Yeah?
there was a special show on Atheist in the Foxhole.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know whether you saw it, but it was really great. It was about generals having prayer breakfast and terrorizing Jewish soldiers. And this one guy's got a lawsuit at Fort Riley against the Army for religious,
Yeah.
non-religious
we know about that.
persecution.
Jeremy Hall, I think is his name.
I
can't
thought I
remember,
had the
but-
page up.
Yeah, we've actually talked about him a few times, and we talked about him yesterday as well.
If you listen to the nonprofits at nonprofitsradio.com, yesterday's episode had a mention of him near the end. So you recommend that special, right? I think he's gone.
I'm guessing we lost Joe there.
Okay. Did you find anything?
I'm not sure, because it's not anything actually I can sit down and just read.
Uh-oh,
That doesn't
atheism
make for good.
discredited right here
Yeah.
on live television.
Although this is about Moses dividing the land up, so it probably falls in the category of God sent them out to kill all their neighbors and take
Yeah,
all their
it probably
crap.
somewhere involves going and killing people and taking their land and their women.
But, all right, so that experiment was a bust.
That'll teach you to try.
Anyway,
that
there's
again.
less than a minute left. The credits are going to pop up any second anyway. We appreciate everybody who watched today, and those of you who called in. Those who didn't call in can email tv@atheist-community.org. You can also visit the ACA website, www.atheist-community.org. Thanks to the crew who's here every week getting everything done ahead of time and scrambling in order to get music on. We'll be going to El Arroyo. Please, you're welcome to join us down there, any atheist or atheist-friendly person. We look forward to seeing you again next week, and you can watch the videos online and visit the FAQ and email us, and we'll see you then.
Bye.